You know, first impressions really do count for a lot. As much as we like to believe ourselves more enlightened than that, people tend to get caught up on the first time they encountered something, whether that be a person, a franchise, a food, basically anything at all really. But in the case of character-driven storytelling, that instinct can hold us back from truly understanding and enjoying the complexities of a character. I mentioned in my Karlach video that my first impressions for most of the companions weren't great, and I'm not too proud to admit that I fell into the trap of not looking past that for the majority of my first playthrough. And no character suffered from this more than Lae'Zel. In the last video, I went on for a bit about how little I ended up liking the first companions you meet for the longest time, and while I would eventually grow to appreciate most of them, I'll be honest, I really didn't gain any appreciation for Lae'Zel until my second playthrough, when I actually took the time to really try to understand her better. And I'm glad I did, because I've since found her to be one of the more interesting companions in the game, at least to talk about. I'm sure you'll forgive me for saying this, but I did not care for Lae'Zel when we first met. She essentially threatens to disembowel you, but once she realises you're not an enemy, she basically says, you'll probably be useful, and tags along until you crash the Nulloid, and then the next time you see her she's been caged and you have to get her out, and all the while she's being a massively antagonistic grouch. And this doesn't really change either, as she spends the majority of her time arguing with you, insulting anyone she can see, being really fucking racist, and essentially just being a wholly unlikable bitch. It's not even a bad first impression with this woman, she just fucking sucks. Or at least that's the impression that I came away with at first. And outside of when investigating the creche, I couldn't replace her with Karlach fast enough. But time makes fools of us all, and I find myself more and more on her side as far as characters go. Because Lae'Zel is a fascinating example of cultural conditioning and the character growth that can result from leaving it behind. So let's talk about her, shall we? Let's talk about why I think Lae'Zel is actually a really good character. Before I do that though, I do feel the need to offer a couple quick apologies for mistakes made in the Karlach video. The first goes to Samantha Bayard for butchering their last name. I don't know why someone so busy would have watched one of my videos, but I still feel bad for not looking into the proper pronunciation, so for that I am sorry. The second apology goes to everyone I accidentally flashed. You see, I am a child, and I find the prospect of people fighting naked really funny, so I turned off armor visibility for most of my second playthrough, and fucking forgot about it until I was making the video, so I apologise to everyone who received that phallic jump scare. It shouldn't happen again, and I'll be honest, I actually find the entire thing fucking hilarious, but it was inappropriate, so I'm sorry if you had to see my dirtiest tadpole. Alright, yeah, glad that's out of the way. Let's get to talking about the president of racism over here. At first glance, Lae'Zel is little more than a violently xenophobic misanthrope, as well as just violent in general. She idly remarks on murdering those around her, she shows open disdain and disgust for the world and the people in it, and she demands those same people show her deference in all things. Her approval is largely based around shows of farce and domination, but also practicality and decisiveness. The best way to increase her approval is simply to let her do all the talking at Creche Yilik, though she still respects when you stand your ground. Though her desire to use the Vaesisk is born of a primal fear, and you get the most approval by allowing her to go first, you still gain a substantial amount if you demand the first go yourself. Lae'Zel is also one of the only two companions who disapprove of acts of charity, but whereas Astarion does so out of the belief that charity is an act of vulnerability and a form of giving up power and security, Lae'Zel seems to be coming from an attitude of extreme pragmatism. Why should you give away something for nothing? You need every resource you have to survive. Lae'Zel is actually a remarkably pragmatic character at times. She teams up with you on the Nodaloid because it's the most likely way to survive, and despite the obvious disgust she shows in having to rely on you, she stays with the party because it's the best way to achieve her goal. There's safety in numbers, and she's not familiar with Faerun in any way. Her pride may get in the way, especially when it comes to dealing with Shadowheart, and she could not make it any more obvious that she thinks she's inherently better than you, but she's still willing to team up and treat you as, if not an equal, then a reliable companion. And that's far more than most any other Gith would do. And this is actually what brings us to the crux of the matter, because basically every issue Lae'Zel has stems from her cultural upbringing, and looking at her through the lens of that context is the key to understanding her as a character. Lae'Zel is a Githyanki, a race of extremely proud and secular warriors bound together by an utterly fanatical devotion to Vlaakith, who has spent millennia corrupting their culture to center itself around her. And this lunatic zeal for Vlaakith is Lae'Zel's defining trait at the beginning of the story, largely because it's how she defines herself.
Since I was born in the cold reaches of world space, I have known but one purpose: to wield a silver sword and ride a red dragon in service of my regent, the Githyanki Queen Vlaakith.
And you get inklings of this all throughout the first act, but nothing gives you as big an insight into her character as your ill-fated visit to Cresh Yalik. You know, as important as first impressions are, my absolute favourite moment in any character-driven narrative is when you get to the part of a story where you get to look at a character and say, "Oh, that's why you're like this." And happily, you get that moment with each of the origin companions in the game, though they all come at wildly different points in the story. From Karlach sharing hers basically right off the bat, to Astarion's "that's why you're like this" not coming in until Act 3. Lae'Zel's comes in right near the end of Act 1, when you arrive at the Creche, and as long as you explore the temple fully, you gain some fascinating insight, not only into your grumpy green companion, but into the completely fucked up culture she hails from. The thing about Githyanki culture is that it's incredibly self-destructive, centered on strength and Githyanki supremacy, while also discouraging any sense of camaraderie or interpersonal connection. There's a sense of toxic individualism to the Githyanki people, as they demand strength and perfection so as not to endanger each other, but they also have absolutely no qualms about killing each other for a little more than proof of individual superiority. I honestly think it's best exemplified in this scene.
Kachuki! We are training to fight Gake! You think they will hesitate?
They won't need to if we keep killing each other for them. It's stupid. Orphe...
Silence! It seems your childish prattling is attracting an audience. You fight again. This time, daggers only. And to the death, as instructed. Who wants to challenge this sniveling Istark? I suppose your inane spewings have distracted enough from my lesson. Go at the swords. I want them sharp enough to peel a Gake's eyeball just by looking at them. I hope you prove as weak as this should we meet on the battlefield, Istik.
The instructor is willing to kill Varl for some perceived slight, but when you confront him about it, he claims that it saves lives, that hesitation leads to more than just your own death when fighting mind flayers.
Our wars are waged against Gake, not bandits and petty thieves. The slightest mistake, the smallest hesitation, and you die. The warrior next to you dies, 100 more behind them. So we ensure that in our ranks, there are no mistakes. I wouldn't expect an Istik to understand. On this plane, inadequacy is expected.
But realistically speaking, you're only weakening your people as a whole by killing prospective soldiers for negligible imperfections or having room for improvement. And doing this is common enough that Lae'Zel mentions she killed 4 of her own classmates for picking fights with her. And while this may indeed mean that the surviving warriors are strong, the Gith as a whole suffer from losing so many able-bodied members, not to mention the time and resources that went into their training and upbringing. The Gith view kindness and companionship as weakness, and this attitude even extends to the unborn, as eggs that don't hatch within an expected time limit are purged. And while you'd think that this makes no sense for a race that wants to win a war against the Illithid Empire, and you'd be right for thinking that, by the way, the reason for it is obvious. See, while this attitude of a singular kind of strength and usefulness is ultimately detrimental to the survival of the Gith as a race, it's absolutely beneficial to Vlaakith's designs on godhood, and that's why the culture is so self-destructively individualistic, because it's entirely centered on Vlaakith herself, and she does not care about the survival of her people. I mentioned in the Karlach video that each of the companions is a victim of abuse or exploitation, and that remains true here. But what sets Lae'Zel apart is that hers is suffered on a societal level, not an individual one. She's been raised with the paradoxical view that the Gith people must thrive and survive, but each individual is inherently worthless unless they make themselves exceptional, and to be exceptional is to be of use to Vlaakith, because, to them at least, she is the Gith people. Vlaakith is a pretty textbook example of a tyrannical dictator. She's fashioned her society to revolve entirely around her. She invents an entire mythos of her strength and perfection to encourage awe and worship, and everything she does is inherently harmful to her people. She lied to them about her ability to resist mind flayers, she lied to them about her godhood, and she lied to them about ascension. All to perpetuate a culture that destroys itself while providing her with the souls she needs to fuel her own ascension. Lae'Zel's dream is to ascend, to become the chosen of her goddess, and to do so, she has become an exemplar Gith. She forms no attachments, she's zealously devoted, and she kills any and all with no hesitation. She has been conditioned by a culture of toxic fanaticism to view herself and others as completely expendable, despite the fact that she wholeheartedly wants the best for the Gith people. And she does this because she thinks it is what's best for the Gith, because it's what she's been taught. The thing about your life being built on a lie though, is that the foundation can very easily crack. And it doesn't just crack over the course of the game, it shatters and burns to dust, with a new, far greater Lae'Zel rising from the ashes of the life she once lived. From here, I'll be talking about Lae'Zel from two different angles, that of her revelations of the truth and that of her growth through romance and companionship. I think both are important to consider, as both force her to take a look at her own upbringing and reconsider what she thought was true. As I said before, Lae'Zel's life, the life of all Gith, is built upon a lie, and the events of the Creche are the catalyst to revealing that to Lae'Zel. And it begins with the failure of the Zaithisk, and how it very nearly kills her in its attempt to extract the tadpole. Lae'Zel assumes the machine must have been tampered with, and this perceived slight leads to the party wiping out both the leader of the Creche and the Inquisitor visiting it. But the truth is that it was functioning as intended. She couldn't know this, of course. To the best of her knowledge, this was a cure, but surviving the process that, unbeknownst to her, should have absolutely ended with her death, sends her on a bit of a roaring rampage of revenge through the Creche, which ultimately results in Vlaakith projecting herself into the room to address you, demanding that you slay the disguised Emperor in the Astral Prism. This is her first mistake, as your conversation with the Emperor reveals her deceit, and when you share it with Lae'Zel, it's the final step in altering the trajectory of her character arc. She's not ready to accept yet that Vlaakith has lied to her, and she immediately begins coping by assuming that it's a test of faith, but the seed of doubt has been planted, and from here she only grows more and more open to the possibility of her queen's lies. Speaking of Vlaakith, the conversation with her provides one of the few instances of an instant game over if you ask her why she can't just do it herself.
Perhaps I misheard. You would not speak ill of a god, would you?
Do not test her. She will be our ruin.
Blaspheming tongue! You wish to see godhood? Wish you to end.
And there's actually a good reason for this. See, Vlaakith, just like any tyrant, is reliant on the projection of strength to maintain her position. As Lae'Zel says later, the first thing young Gith are taught is that Vlaakith is the one truth. Pleasing her is the way to glory. Failing her in any measure is deserving of death. Vlaakith is their god, and during the Zaithisk scene, we even see Lae'Zel essentially quoting scripture to help endure the pain of having her brain melted. And while Vlaakith is indeed powerful, she's not an actual god, but she needs her people to believe she is to maintain her control over them. Just as with any tyrant, she needs to be seen as strong, and this is why she kills you when you question her power, because not doing so would make her look weak. It's the same mindset that had Putin posing shirtless on a bear while his people starved. It's all about projecting strength, no matter the cost. Anyway, it's soon after all this happens that Kithrak Voss arrives in your camp and reveals the truth to Lae'Zel. He even reveals that the Zaithisk was in fact not tampered with. Its purpose is to kill the infected. And learning all of this is a devastating blow to Lae'Zel. She very clearly struggles with comprehending how she and her people have been horribly wronged.
If Voss speaks true, if Ascension is a lie, if tadpole purification is a fairy tale, then I have not sinned against Vlaakith. She has sinned against me. I'd never thought Vlaakith a tyrant, or me as a vassal. She was the source of my might, and I the envoy of her will. A warrior, a champion, a destroyer. But if Voss is right, and Vlaakith consumes the Ascended to gain power, then I am no destroyer. I am mere livestock, bred to be harvested and devoured. Every Githyanki is a slave with a singular purpose. Not to cull the Geich, not to prevent their grand design, but to raise Vlaakith to true godhood.
And by the end of Act 2, it's revealed that Voss was telling the truth. Orpheus is alive and the rightful heir, and everything Vlaakith has ever taught them is a lie. And when Vlaakith confronts you once again in Act 2, she reveals just how desperate she really is to see that the truth is never revealed to anyone else.
Return to the astral prism. Slay Orpheus the Pretender. Serve me, and I will ascend you. You will be no mere warrior, nor Kithrak. You will be Barta Vlaakith, Commander of Dragons. My only, my chosen. A final chance. Kneel before me. Make your promise.
Vlaakith lies her ass off and offers Lae'Zel the greatest of honours the Githyanki know, but Lae'Zel has seen far too much for that to work any longer. Well, I mean, you can absolutely convince her to submit to Vlaakith again if you're an asshole, but like I said when I talked about Karlach, that's not the kind of story I'm telling in these videos.
I gave you my faith, and you called me traitor. I gave you my life, and you ordered your knights to hunt me. I have witnessed too much, and you have given me too little. Finally, I can see. Orpheus will live, and I will hear his creed. This is my word.
Your word is nothing. You are nothing. The Kithraki will bring you. I will tear your flesh from your bones and devour your skull's marrow while you beg for death. I will consume you. I will unmake you.
Vlaakith can rage until the heavens fall. She can send every warrior she has after Lae'Zel, but she cannot break Lae'Zel's will with empty threats, and that's all she has. But even so, Lae'Zel doesn't come away unscathed. For all her pride and strength and her noble intentions for her people, even the mighty Gith warrior has to grieve.
Loss. It permeates every corner of Lae'Zel's mind. Everything she knew to be true, every plan and aspiration she ever held has been painfully ripped away. Lae'Zel's bitterness is born of sadness. She is mourning the loss of the person she once was, and can never be again.
How well you've come to know me. But in truth, she didn't take everything. I have what I have gathered for myself. I'm more to a new regent, a new land, and new allies. Vlaakith cannot unmake she who no longer exists. And so, from the old battle cries is birthed another. Tmar Salar Orpheus, Ma Stilnar Forgen in Yeri. Orpheus's will above all. May the comet blaze my path forward.
It's something people don't talk about very often, and it's something I'll probably make a video on at some point, but we don't just grieve for the dead. The pain of loss doesn't just come from the death of a loved one. it also comes from the end of a friendship, the destruction of a precious object, and indeed, the loss of the future you thought you had. It can't be denied that Lae'Zel is a lucky woman. She has reliable allies and a new purpose and a sense of freedom, but she still lost her dream, and she still has to grieve over what was taken from her. But she'll be fine in the end, because she's not alone, and she may yet see her people into a brighter future when all of this is over. But before we get to that, let's talk about her romance. I'm gonna level with you, viewer. When Lae'Zel tried to initiate intimacy on my first playthrough, I could not hit no fast enough. And not just because I'm gay, it was mostly because I found her incredibly fucking off-putting, and I suspect that it was a similar situation for a lot of people. Lae'Zel just came up to me and said, "I want to taste you," and all I could think was, that thing is lined with rows of teeth. Granted, I can't blame her for wanting it. A gith can smell quality thussy from a mile away, but it didn't help that I did not like her at all. I suspect that for most people's first playthrough, unless you are specifically into women being mean to you, she wasn't exactly the most appealing potential partner for the happy horizontal hula. Larian revealed that, of the Origin companions, Lae'Zel was the least romanced, and I definitely chalked that up to her horrible first impression, which is a shame because I really think she has the most interesting romantic narrative, at least of the girls. Lae'Zel doesn't believe in love at the start of the game. As I mentioned before, the Gith have had the idea of personal connections conditioned out of them, so obviously Lae'Zel doesn't believe in that most personal of connections, but she doesn't stay like that. And while I think it would have been interesting to use her to explore the prospect of aromanticism, I can still respect that they wanted to tell a different story. Like I said, at first, Lae'Zel doesn't believe in love. She says as much herself. She does believe in carnal pleasure though, and that's specifically what she wants from you. Should you agree, the two of you engage in a round of bed-breaking sex that I will not be showing because I love my channel and don't want it to be taken down, and then that's that. You can entice her into another round or two, but sex is all it is. Until Act 2 at least. A few long rests into Act 2 and Lae'Zel wakes you up in the middle of the night because she feels obsessed with you and needs you to prove yourself, so she challenges you to single combat. I gotta be honest, this is the funniest fucking thing to me. Lae'Zel essentially says, "I don't know how to handle my feelings for you, so you have to die." And if you win, she fucking loses her mind with how impressed she is. But if you lose, she starts crying because she doesn't actually want to see you get hurt, but she can't figure out another way to process her feelings. And she decides your strength doesn't matter in the end because she likes you too much. She's like a murder-happy school kid with a crush. It's honestly kind of adorable. It goes even further after you support her during Vlaakith's camp visit, as she's finally able to admit that she wants to experience a gentler love. And it's hard to do. Largely, I think, because it's an inherent display of vulnerability, but it's still something she's willing to do for you. Because she loves you, and she wants to not only experience all of you are, but acknowledge all you are as well. It's a moment of truly phenomenal character growth, but it's not the greatest she has. No, there are two more moments that put even this to shame, and while one is tied to her romance, the other isn't, and it's one of my favourite moments in the whole of the game. There is still her romance to talk about, however, and I'm just going to let the scene play because it's so good, and if you haven't seen it, you really should.
Get up. There's something you should see. I know it's early, but this couldn't wait. Watch. I used to hate that sight. The glowing sky, the long shadows, the fading stars. I lived for the red of blood and the black of death. Now, I see the colors between. Look at the sun. What do you see? Yes. And something else too. Beauty. The dawn was my torment. Rustling leaves. Agony. I couldn't wait to escape this place. Now, revel in you. You showed me the betweens and beyonds. Between war and peace. Beyond passion and obsession. Most importantly, you showed me freedom. There's more, but I don't know how to say it. I don't know what to call it. I just know, whatever comes next, I want you near. When all this is over, will you stay with me? For good? Chaque Vome Findu, source of my joy.
What we see here is a Lae'Zel who has come to appreciate a world that she once held nothing but disdain for, who has found beauty in the rising sun and comfort in the companionship of someone she loves. She never even says the word, and I'm not certain she understands that love is what she's feeling, but that is what we see happening. Through experiencing the world with you, she's come to see just how vast and complicated and beautiful everything is. And she's learned that she is vast and complicated and beautiful in ways she could never have imagined before. And it's brought her peace and freedom in a way that nobody and nothing else has. At the end of this telling of the story, with Orpheus freed and the Netherbrain destroyed and the world saved, Lae'Zel is presented with a choice. She might choose to join Orpheus in his crusade to free the Gith from Vlaakith's dominion, or she may stay on the material plane with her newfound allies. And while the former would indeed be a fitting end to her character arc, a story of the most devout of Vlaakith's soldiers discovering the truth and fighting to liberate her people from the cruel grasp of a tyrant, I actually like the latter far more. Whether you romance her or not, you can convince Lae'Zel to remain, and this is what brings us to my favourite Lae'Zel moment in the entire game.
My own friend, the Hellswalker. I thought slaying Vlaakith's hunters in the Cliffs of Swords' Teeth might be the month's pinnacle. But I was wrong. Being right here, with you, is an infinitely greater pleasure. Were it not for you, I might not have known the value of partnership, connection. I found new allies now. New friends. People I trust and who trust me in return. We've heard word of a Githyanki outpost hidden deep in Chult, the last of Vlaakith's Sword Coast strongholds. I don't suppose you'd consider fleeing the Hells and joining us there to slay every last Sarth and Kithrak. You say stuck, and still you stay. Your devotion to Karlach knows no bounds, nor, it seems, does your fortitude. You impressed me from the beginning, you know. It was my own foolish pride that ever kept me from admitting it. To you, or myself. I just wanted you to know that. Now go, mingle while you can. That's the word, right? Mingle? We'll meet again. The Hells are too small to contain a soul as tremendous as yours.
In this playthrough, I never romanced her, and she's still learned to see the beauty in the world, the beauty of friends, because that's the thing about the influence of people like Vlaakith. It cannot last unless it's continuously inflicted upon someone. Lae'Zel, having been removed from the influence of a culture that conditioned her, has found freedom in allowing others into her life, in forming connections, in seeing the in-between, in trust. And because of this, we see her happy. and it's a pure happiness, divorced from ferocity or pride or battle or even the idea of being a utility. Romance aside, this is the happiest you will ever see her because she is free. Lae'Zel has finally found herself, and she did so in the world she was taught was nothing but a prison. Now, even without a dragon, she soars freely, unbound by the self-destructive teachings of a tyrant. And that, I think, is the most beautiful and most deserved ending she could earn. Also, if you want to speedrun gaining an appreciation for Lae'Zel's attitude in Act 1, I want you to imagine yourself in her shoes. Imagine that you and a group of morons were infected with the deadliest disease known to man, but you just happen to know the cure for it. All it takes is a quick trip to the hospital to get it taken care of. But the idiots you're stuck with argue against it with the logic of, I don't trust hospitals, I think the doctor will try to kill me. Or they don't believe in modern medicine and think you should ask the random scary grandma in the woods, or see if you can cure the disease with an ice pick lobotomy, or fucking making a deal with Satan for a cure. And then one of them starts trying to make the disease worse because they think it makes them stronger. And you don't want to leave these people to their fate because it's the most horrifying way to die you know of, so you're just fucking roped into the most miserable road trip of your life with an amnesiac, a woman who literally sets herself on fire, and a leech in spandex. Lae'Zel shows way more patience for the party's bullshit than any other Gith ever would, and she deserves a fucking medal for putting up with it. Because be honest viewer, you wouldn't be able to do it. You'd snap and leave them to their fate long before Raphael showed his smug prick face. But yeah, that's all I had to say. Thank you for watching, and a huge thanks to my patrons for the support. If you like this video and can spare the money, blah blah blah, you know where I'm going with this. I actually found myself liking Lae'Zel more as I worked on this video, and it really made me regret my first playthrough, where I couldn't figure out how to free her from her bindings in the Temple of Baal because it was like 3 in the morning and my brain was fuzzing out. So I decided to take a long rest and accidentally left her to die. So I didn't get to see her ending my first time around. She was actually chosen by Oren in my second playthrough too, but I figured it out that time, so yay for me. I honestly think that if she's chosen, there should be like a 30% chance she just shows up the next morning with Oren's head on a stick or something. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to me defend the mean lady with no nose, and I hope you have a lovely day. See you in the next video. Bye.